Halacha Yomit Hilchot Shabbat. How are we holding so far? We are in Halacha 7 now. What are the parameters of planes and trains on Shabbat? You think, what do you mean? You're not allowed to take a plane. Do you take a plane on Shabbat? No, you're not allowed to take a plane on Shabbat. Or what about trains? Why would we ask such questions? So there's a Gemara in Masechet Shabbat, Daf Yutet Amud Aleph, that is a puzzling Gemara. It has many explanations to it, and each explanation has halachot that are derived from those explanations. What does the Gemara say? That you can't board a boat 3 days before Shabbat, within 3 days of Shabbat, but 3 days before Shabbat, then you'd be allowed to board the boat. That's what it says. Well, and then the Gemara says, but if it's for a dvar mitzvah, if it's for a mitzvah, then you would be allowed to board the boat. So one of the explanations, one of the many explanations, is Rabbeinu Hananel, one of the great Geonim. That means even he preceded the Rishonim. And Rabbeinu Hananel explains that this means that one is not allowed to board a boat within 3 days of Shabbat, because on Shabbat he's going to come to a point that the boat is going to get within 10 tfachim of the land. And within 10 tfachim of the land, that's a problem of tchumin, that he's going to violate the tchumin. That means it's going to go more than 2,000 amma, which is roughly 1.1 kilometer or 0.72 miles, depending how you want to calculate it. But that amount is not a lot. Less than a mile is not a lot at all. Then what's going to happen is that if it's before 3 days, apparently, which this is one of the reasons why the Rif argues on that, Rabbeinu Chanai says, what's the difference before 3 days or after 3 days? But apparently before 3 days, then the boat is never going to really, is already going to pass the shallow waters. But within 3 days, once it's going to hit Shabbat, it might still be in shallow waters. Apparently, that's what Rabbeinu Hananel holds. But either way, you see from over here that a boat that is above 10 tfachim is not subject to the laws of tchumin. So let me give it a little bit of background here. Tchumin is a rabbinic prohibition that one is not allowed on Shabbat to go outside of an area that more than 2,000 amma. It's not very relevant in Los Angeles, even if I want to walk from Pico Robertson to the valley. If I take Highland, I'm always going to be with houses. It's not really going to be a problem. In Lakewood, it's much more of a problem if somebody goes from one development to the next. Sometimes it's just a wooden area. It's an open area. And that's a problem. And there are books written about this. One book was just published last week about the different tchumin in Lakewood. And somebody would have to, if he'd have to go from one development to the other, and it's a walkable distance of, let's say, an hour or something, he'd have to put food beforehand at the end of 2,000 amot to be able to go to the next 2,000 amot. So it is relevant in some areas. In the big cities, since it's consecutive housing, tchumin doesn't really apply. But where it does apply is in a boat. Somebody is taking a boat and he's on the boat on Shabbat. This has happened many, many times throughout history. You'll see it in the Gemara many times that the Chachamim, Rabbi Akiva and others went on a boat and they had to get to Rome and whatever else. And it was, if it's above 10 tfachim, which the boat usually is, you're above the water, above the ground, 10 tfachim, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. Because there is no tchumin above 10. In other words, the parameters of Shabbat is similar to the parameters that it was in the Mishkan. And in the Mishkan, it was on a surface of 10 tfachim. And there wasn't, above 10 tfachim, there's, it's not called one of the surfaces of Shabbat. As a matter of fact, the Gemara has a whole discussion whether Mashiach could come on Shabbat. And one of the issues of Mashiach coming on Shabbat is how Eliyahu Navi going to come. He's going to violate the prohibition of tchumin. The Gemara says, but there's no tchumin above 10. It goes back and forth. That we're just, these are relevant issues. So Rabbi Yosef Misas, one of the great Rabbanim and the great thinkers of the Moroccan Jewry, writes in his Shelot U'Shuvot Ma'im Chaim Siman Kuf Lamed Aleph, we bring down what happens if somebody's going to go on the airplane on Shabbat? Now, we're not talking about that he's boarding an airplane on Shabbat, because there's all types of problems from the tickets and from getting into carrying and Eruv. Obviously that's Chilul Shabbat Deoraita. If somebody's in the air, does he technically violate Tchum Shabbat? And you're going to tell me, when does that ever happen? You'll see in a moment. So if somebody is in the air over 10 Tvachim, says Rabbi Shalom Misas, even if he's on top of the ground, but he doesn't violate Tchumin, because he's on top of the ground. So just he's on top of the ocean, 10 Tvachim, there's no Tchumin. So too if he's on top of the ocean, so too if he's on top of the ground, 10 Tvachim, it's not a problem. One of his great contemporaries was Rabbi Shlomo HaKohen from the city of Dobdo. Dobdo was Ira Kohanim, all Kohanim over there. He was a great Lamdan. He was a great Talmid Chacham, Rabbi Shlomo HaKohen. And he wrote to him a response. They went back and forth. And he says, above the ocean, 10 Tfachim, then there is no Tchumin. But if you're above the land, who says there isn't? And they go back and forth. Where would this be relevant? There are flights that somebody takes from Japan to Los Angeles. Now, there is a question about the date line, which it would take us a whole 20 minutes to explain the whole date line. But in short, the world, if you would go around the world, you would pass 24 hours. And there has to be a beginning and an end where there's going to be the time starts and the time ends. So according to the secular a decision that they made, they went according to the Greenwich meridian, which is going to be 24 hours. It's passing through Greenland, and that's where the beginning starts and it ends somewhere else. But the Chachamim have a discussion where, according to halacha, that would be. And there are different opinions, and it's a very complicated subject how we hold. But to briefly mention, if somebody wants to see on the web, there's on the Star K, they have a very good explanation of how the date line works. There is going to, and the maps, when somebody is traveling, he has to know this. For example, somebody going to Hawaii, according to Rav Chaim Nai, one of the opinions, he is going to be crossing the date line. According to the Chazon Ish, he's not going to be crossing the date line. In Japan, he's going to be in one date line. So what happens is that if you take off in Japan on Friday, you're going to be shortly in the air it's going to be Shabbat for you, and then it's going to go back to Friday. Very interesting. So while you're in the air, it's Shabbat. What do? So many contemporary authorities say that since you're above 10 tfachim, and you're above the ocean, so even according to Rabbi Shlomo HaKohen, it would be allowed, and you would be above the ocean, so you're not violating the prohibition of tchumin. What you would need, you don't have to do kiddush and avdalah, but you have to make sure you don't have any muktzeh, you're not touching any screens, or even the bathroom's automated for that amount of time. That amount of time, you have to calculate it. It's not that hard. There's myzvanim.com. They go over exactly how to do it. And you would have to be in Shabbat mode while you're in the air, and then you come back out. So in and out. So that's where it could be relevant. Obviously, taking a train, even though you're just going in and out and not carrying anything, you're violating the prohibition of tchumin if you're going in an area that is uninhibited. And according to the Rif, even if somebody is going 12 mil, that means roughly 10 miles, that's the oraita tchumin. So it's a very serious subject that people have to be aware of. Now, one subject where it applies is what we spoke about yesterday, is when you receive packages. Now, are you allowed to use those packages on Shabbat? Sometimes there's something that you really need for the meal. And this would depend whether there is a subject of within the vicinity, the package was there before Shabbat in the Tchum. So you really should try to look on your Amazon app where it's at. If it's coming outside of the city, outside of the Tchum, you wouldn't be able to use it. However, based on what we said, if it would be close enough, or even if it's a Safek Tchum, the poskim are lenient. So if you have a doubt that maybe it was within the vicinity before Shabbat, so if the package came like late into Shabbat, so then it's more of a question. It came earlier into Shabbat, so it could be it was already in the delivery place, which is not far away, then it wouldn't violate Shabbat. So over here, a lot of times Amazon has shipping areas that their warehouses are within the tchum, so that would be allowed. But if they have to be coming outside of the tchum, so you're using something, that would be more of a problem. These are where the applications apply. Chazaku baruch.